Z गया माना यहाँ से Z Z
ये कौन
जाहिद
कौन था
छोटा नहीं तेरा दोस्त जाहिद बड़ा वाला गाड़ी चलाएगा पानी में इधर ब्लू कलर की लाइट कैन रिजल्ट क्या नहीं ये खाता
वो पानी दे मेरा
ये खाता सब मेरा पिज्जा हाँ मेरा पानी खाता हमें जरा आवाज नहीं करने का
As we discussed in the last class, the topic classroom English, we stopped in the middle of that. That is, the topic is very brief one, but from exam point of view, it is very, very important. You can get 1 or 2 questions in part A. So in today's class, we complete. Okay. Most of you agree that my voice is very clear, audible, to take the notes and to listen what I say. Thank you very much for your confirmation. Okay. Now, I can give a brief. See that yesterday we discussed the topic classroom English, half of it. But even though I can recap that very brief, and from the point where we stopped yesterday, from there we can discuss to some extent in detail. Okay, we know that the classroom is a place where it provides an opportunity for the students to communicate with the teacher and with his classmates. And also, a classroom provides a chance for the students to involve in group discussion activity, in role plays, in debate, to develop the students' communication skills. When we are talking about English subject, the classroom atmosphere, particularly English subject, is very useful for the students. And in this subject, in this classroom, the students are allowed to communicate with the teachers, with others, to take part in various activities by using English language only. Why the teacher can insist to you to use that English language? Because our object itself is to make the students to speak without the fear, to speak confidently, and to gain the knowledge of English subject. With that intention, an English teacher can insist each one to communicate in English. So that is the main object of this subject, so that every student is insisted by the teacher as far as possible to communicate in English. Initially you may commit some mistake, but if you go on practicing over a period of the time, you know yourself where you are committing the mistake, or you can know from your friends, you can know from your classmates, you can know from your teacher, then you can correct. If you commit any mistake, then you will be a good speaker. From that point of view, we know what type of English language is used in the classroom when the teacher communicates with the students, or if the students wants to communicate with the teacher, or what situation, what are the possible dialogues for communication, such things we can know. As we noticed that when you are using English language in the classroom, as classroom itself is a formal occasion, when you are communicating with the teacher, it is the formal but not informal. When you are communicating with your friends, with your relatives, with the known person, the situation is considered informal. For example, you are communicating with your father. You are communicating with your elder brother. You are communicating with your younger sister. You are communicating with your close relative or the friend. At that time, you do not bother about your language. Yes or no? You do not bother about the formal rules of manner towards the other person. Why? Because the situation itself is informal. In informal situation, we do not bother about that, because we are not going to affect our relations in any more by using that language. So that we do not bother about the communication in informal situation. But coming to the communication in formal occasion, for example, where you are communicating with your classmates, the place where you are communicating with your seniors, the place where you are communicating with your teacher, your principal, unknown person outside at an office. All the situations we can consider formal. In formal situation, our language should be perfect. We need to focus. Of them, the classroom is a one kind of the situation where we are supposed to use the formal language. When we use the formal language in the classroom, we need to follow some tips for perfect communication. First one is, as we discussed yesterday, while speaking we have to use the complete sentence. Yes. Second one is, we have to use the formal words. See that if you go through the dictionary to develop your vocabulary, the knowledge of English language, you can find that is, some words are mentioned formal, some words are given informal. It means the words which are mentioned within the bracket, the formal, it is an indication that the speaker must use that word in formal situation but not in formal. So that bifurcation, the type of words are more and many in English language. That is, some words are there in English language. We have to select such words which are meant for formal use. We have to use in formal. There are certain words which are meant for using in informal occasion. We have to use informal occasion. Similarly, as classroom is the formal occasion to communicate with each other, with the teacher or teacher to the students, at that time we have to use the formal words. Second one is, we have to use the modal verbs to be sound polite. As we know that modal verbs which are in 13, to be sound polite we have to use as many modal verbs as possible, depend on the communication or the situation. And we have to use the punctuation marks while speaking. We express punctuation marks by our body language, by the tone, by remaining silent, by expression, by raising the tone fall, by following the tone fall, raising and falling and raising our tone, we can indicate the tone. And we have to give the pause, remain silent where and when necessary. And finally, we have to practice to become a good speaker. If you want to speak English perfect, it may be classroom, it may be outside, whatever the occasion that it may be. Next. Now let us see that there are certain expressions are commonly used by the teacher. Similarly, there are certain expressions commonly used by the student. Now, from exam point of view, I would like to speak a few words. In exam, you are asked to write a few expressions used by the teacher and a few expressions used by the student in the classroom. If a question is given like that, most of the students feel confused how the answer is attempted. I know that everybody knows the answer, but if you do not know how to attempt the answer, most of the students will be in confusion mode. So as to avoid the type of a difficult situation in examination I have bifurcated with two categories with the heading. One is expression by the teacher and expression used by the student. See that I can read what are the general expressions that are used by the teacher, but these expressions cannot be used by the student. Another side towards your right, some expressions are given used by the student, but these expressions cannot be used by the teacher. See that. Teacher expression used by the teachers are meant for the teacher. Expressions used by the students are meant for the students. So students cannot use the expression used by the teacher. Similarly, a teacher cannot use the expression used by the student. So that by looking at the sentence itself, by looking at the phrase itself, we can know that the expression is used by the teacher or the student. So as to test the knowledge of the students, a question can be given whether the students know what are the expressions are used by the teacher, what are the expressions are used by the students. To know that, a question also can appear in your exam. And I really doubt what are the expressions are used by the teacher. First one is copy this in your book. See that this sentence cannot be used by the students. Yes or no? By looking at it, we can know that that is the sentence used by the teacher. Next one is you can start now. Go back to your place. First listen, then repeat. You can do that. మధ్య బ్రేక్ వస్తుందమ్మా. కొందరు స్టూడెంట్స్ they are requesting to admit, so that it takes some seconds. Okay, next. First listen, then repeat. You can do that. Open your book at page 10. Who knows the answer? Say it after me. I think it is your turn now. Raise your hand. See that when you go through all these expressions, everybody can say that these are the expressions specially used by the teacher. Like this, there are many. Only I have taken a few. Generally, what are the sentences frequently used by the teacher? Like that, if you have an idea similar to that, you yourself can imagine, can list out a many expressions that are used by the teacher. Similarly, expression used by the students. Example, may I go out to meet the principal? If students wants to take the permission or seek the permission from the teacher, then the students can use the sentence. So this is the expression especially used by students. So that I have listed out under the heading of expressions used by the students. Next, please check my notes. See that this sentence cannot be used by the teacher. Who can use the sentence?
Student.
Certainly, this is the expression is used by the students. Please check my notes. Similarly, please explain it again. Could you please clarify my doubts? Can you please extend the deadline for submission? Last one is, yes, we completed taking the notes. Classroom English. And okay. Now let us see that some of the expressions are used by the students depend on some situation. Okay. For example, if the students wants to greet the teacher, how student is supposed to greet the teacher? Good morning or good afternoon, good evening. Depend on the situation and the time we go for using the phrase. So that if the students wants to greet the teacher, how student is supposed? Answer is good morning, good evening madam, or good morning sir, good evening sir, etc. Depend on the situation. Second one is, if a situation is given like that, to know whether the student is good at or not with the classroom English, like that, ask permission to leave the class. If the student wants to leave the class, then the student is supposed to seek the permission from the teacher. And what is the language the student is supposed to use? So, can you please permit me to go out, sir or madam? See that in place of the can, Could also we can use, it depend on the situation, but at this level in Indian culture, we follow the hierarchy very strictly. As we follow the hierarchy very strictly, or the formal rules of the manner very strictly, I suggest you to use the could only instead of can now. Okay, so that we can say, could you please permit me to go out, sir? If you use can in Indian culture, and the teacher can feel some extent you are disrespecting the teacher. Not to create any that kind of the negative feelings from your point of view, it is always good to use could only to indicate the highest degree of politeness, because the teaching is the noble profession. These are the ones once upon a time. After the corona, the situation is became up and down. That is different. But here you are suggested to use could only instead of the can. Could you please permit me to go out, sir? But in the answer it is given can, to have some kind of the discussion with you how the can and the could is different. For example, if you write the can, your answer cannot be considered wrong. But so to remain the situation seems to be highest degree of politeness, could is more appropriate. Next, ask the teacher for a similar word in your mother tongue. See that if a teacher is explaining a lesson, or you want the meaning of a word in the mother tongue, it may be Telugu, it may be Hindi. Then students want to clarify or to get that information, the similar word in the meaning of that word in mother tongue. If that is the situation is there in the classroom, how a student is supposed to ask? Here it is given, sir or madam, could you please tell me a similar word in my mother tongue? See that, sir or madam, could you please tell me a similar word in my mother tongue? So like that, a situation is given, and then you are asked to write appropriate the possible dialogue or the sentence that is used by the student. So these are the examples. Like that, some more I can give you. Ask the teacher to extend the deadline for a submission. See that a teacher declared that every student has to submit your record by Monday. Because of some busy schedules or because of hectic work, it may not possible the students to complete it soon. Then students come forward to make request the teacher to extend the date. If that is the situation is there, if you want to communicate with the teacher in the classroom, what is the language a student is supposed, we can see now. Excuse me, madam. ఇక్కడ కింద రాసామమ్మా. So could will be more appropriate, so that could, it is good if we use in this place. Could you please extend the deadline for a submission? Question mark. Can ఇచ్చామమ్మా, కెన్ రాస్తే రాంగ్ అనేది కాదు, but to remain the situation to be more sound polite, then could is the appropriate one. Excuse me, madam, could you please extend the deadline for a submission? Next. Now, similarly, to test the knowledge of the students of classroom English, then you are given a dialogue. So after going through the dialogue, then students has to identify on which occasion the dialogue is delivered. Is the idea clear? Similarly, in which situation, how the students are supposed to respond to use the language, like that. A dialogue is given. Then after reading the dialogue, the student has to guess on what occasion the dialogue is used by the teacher. You have to guess the dialogue and you have to state the answer. For that I have given some questions or some dialogues that are used by the teacher. So after reading that, you have to guess on what occasion the teacher can use the dialogue. For example, that is all for today. See that this is the dialogue is used by the teacher. Yes or no? When the teacher can use the dialogue, that is all for
फोन
today.
चार्जिंग नहीं है
At the end
नहीं
of the
आता तो 2
class.
बजे तक
Yes, what are the subject that it may be?
वही
The teacher at the end of the class can say that that is the all for today. Answer is at the end of a class. Next one is how many are
పోతే ఆదాయ
absent?
దివానా తు
Question
జాదా
mark. ఇక్కడ మన క్వశ్చన్ మార్క్ పర్లేదమ్మా, ఎందుకంటే నా సిస్టమ్ లో టైప్ చేసేటప్పుడు ఆ కీ పనిచేయట్లేదు కాబట్టి క్వశ్చన్ మార్క్ ఇవ్వలేదు. కానీ మీరు నోట్స్ రాసుకునేటప్పుడు మాత్రం క్వశ్చన్ మార్క్ ఉందా అని చెప్పి క్వశ్చన్ మార్క్ పెట్టాలి. ఓకేనా? హౌ మెనీ ఆర్ absent? So this is the dialogue is used by the teacher. When the teacher can use the dialogue to know the strength of the class. If the strength of the class is very dull, then teacher certainly can ask a question, how many students are absent? So this is the question dialogue used by the teacher. The teacher can use on the occasion when the strength of the class is very dull, and to know what is the strength of the class. For the purpose, the teacher can use that dialogue. That is how many are absent. Answer is to know the strength of a class. Next one is were you present on that day?
कहाँ जाते
So
हैं
this is the dialogue a teacher can say in the classroom.
आपको
When the teacher can say the dialogue,
Baba
that
phone
is
करते हो।
were you present on that day? See that for example, a teacher wants to
पहले करना
ask
है
the
बोलते
question
समझते नहीं
of previous subject to know how many of you are studied it or good at the previous class subject or the topic. And if most of the students or one or the other
charging
students
है, जरा रुक,
are remain
charging
silent without any answer, without any comment,
तू खेलने का जाना बोल
then
तू
the teacher asks the question, were you present on the day
और
when I taught the topic? Yes or no?
पावर
Then it means
और लिख जाते हैं ना
when
जा
the
दीवाने
teacher asked the dialogue, that question, were you present on that day? When the teacher asked that question, when the student did not answer the question, and to know whether he or she was present on the day of explanation, to know whether the student was present or not on the day when the teacher explained the topic. To know the presence of the teacher on the day, the teacher asked a question, that is, were you present on the day? Okay. Next, let us start the lesson. This is the question or the dialogue used by the teacher. It is used by the teacher before starting a lesson. Yes or no? Let us start the lesson. So it is answer is to begin the lesson. Next. Open your book at page 10. So this is the dialogue is delivered by the teacher, and the dialogue is delivered by the teacher with the students. The students can guess. That is, the students are instructed to turn the page 10 and continue the lesson or the exercise. On that occasion only, the teacher can use the dialogue. Open your books at page 10. Now, say it again. So this is the dialogue is used by the teacher. When the teacher uses this dialogue, the students can guess that to repeat again for more quality. It may be pronunciation, it may be to check the pronunciation of the students. At that time, the teacher can say it again for more clarity. Next, why don't you say it loudly? So this is the dialogue generally used by the teacher in the classroom. When the teacher can use that word, the sentence, why don't you say it loudly? See that when the students answering complete low voice, at the time, the teacher say it in a loud voice. Yes or no? Next, who knows the answer? See that teacher, generally this is the word every time teacher uses in the classroom when the teacher asks the many questions to the student. So this dialogue is used by the teacher. At the time, when most of the students remain silent, or most of the students, if they do not respond to the question of the teacher, then teacher can say this dialogue, who knows the answer? So this is the dialogue is delivered by the teacher. On what occasion? Answer is when most of the students do not know answer. Then to know who knows the answer, the teacher uses the dialogue, who knows the answer. Next. Say it after me. So this is the dialogue is used by the teacher. Now, can you guess the situation when this is used by the teacher? The situation to practice the expression more fluently and clearly. If the teacher wants to feel that the students require some more practice in saying the pronunciation for more clarity and fluency. At the time, the teacher can use the dialogue, say it after me. Next. Go on, Suresh. So this is the expression is used by the teacher. When the teacher can use this expression in the classroom to encourage the particular student. If the student is performing well or responding up to the mark, so as to encourage the student, and teacher can use go on Suresh. Next. Will you complete it in 5 minutes? Okay. When the teacher can use this dialogue, will you complete it in 5 minutes? See that this is the dialogue or the sentence is used by the teacher to make the students fast and to follow the time management. Yes or no? To complete within the time or before the time. So as to make the students to complete the given exercise or any activity fast and manage the time, teacher can use, will you complete it in 5 minutes? Next. Who is your partner? So this is the dialogue is used by the teacher. When the teacher can use this dialogue, who is your partner? If the teacher is conducting any activity, it may be group discussion, it may be role play, it may be any activity, pair activity. At the time, the teacher wants to know who is the partner of the student. At that time, the teacher can ask a question, who is your partner? If the teacher is asking that question, who is your partner, you can guess that teacher wants to know the partner of the student. So that is the occasion. Next. Don't have a discussion. Don't have a discussion. So this is the expression is used by the teacher. Can you guess on what situation the teacher can use it? So at that moment when it is not required the students to express or to speak anything. At that moment, the teacher can use the dialogue, don't have a discussion. So what is the answer? Not to talk at the time of expression. Okay, next. I think it is your turn now. Okay, this is